over delays in the Guangzhou-Shenzhen-Hong Kong Express Rail Link project. Vicky Kung has our top story tonight.
So it turned out that back in November last year, the government already knew the Express Rail Link won't open in 2015 as planned. Still, Secretary for Transport and Housing Anthony Cheung insisted today there was no cover-up. Cheung said he had originally planned to inform the LegCo Railway Subcommittee about the delay at his meeting on November 22nd.
The CEO of the MTR Corporation rang me and opposed the idea of telling the LegCo both sides held different scenarios. One more optimistic, the MTR Corporation scenario. The government side, we held a more conservative scenario. So there was disagreement. It was not collusion in all senses.
Cheung said the government and the MTR Corporation then agreed on what to disclose.
So at the end of the day, the way to inform the LegCo was we have to be very factual. So the factual report to LegCo was construction works will be completed within 2015, followed by 6 to 9 months testing and trial operations.
That's why Cheung said he too was surprised when the MTR Corporation announced a 2-year delay last month. But when asked if the railway giant alone should foot the bill for the delay or be punished for its over-optimistic management, Cheung had this to say.
Well, the purpose of my stand-up here is not to talk about penalties or whatever.
Cheung also played down the embarrassment of naming Professor Lee Chek-fan to chair an expert investigative panel, only to have Lee turned down the appointment hours later. The transport chief said he was clumsy to have overlooked the fact that Lee is an independent, non-executive director of the key contractor involved in the railway project. Vicky Kung, TVB News.
The government will begin scrutinizing tens of thousands of submissions as the first round of political reform consultation draws to a close. As Rani Samtani reports, there's still no consensus yet on how chief executive candidates should be nominated.
Various groups made their way to the central government offices to submit reform proposals on the final day of public consultation. The Confederation of Trade Unions and the Neighborhood and Workers' Service Center agree on a 3-track nomination procedure, which includes civil nomination.
The true democracy for the Hong Kong people. Otherwise, we can't accept any method or any solutions for nominating the candidates for the chief executive.
League of Social Democrats lawmaker Leung Kwok Kung criticized reform proposals that do not include civil nomination.
The proposal from DAB and from Anson Chen and also from those academics, they are not genuine democratic proposal since they deny the civic nomination. Our standpoint is very clear. Please amend the basic law if the basic law didn't serve the purpose of the universal suffrage.
In addition, 9 scholars unveiled their reform package. The group has proposed expanding the nominating committee by including, for example, civil servants, environmentalists, and ethnic minorities.
We try our very best to design a system which would not lead to a constitutional or political crisis that China, Beijing, has to veto the choice of Hong Kong people. So we try to balance around all interests.
Chief Secretary for Administration Carrie Lam said the Task Force on Constitutional Development, which she heads, has received tens of thousands of submissions. Lam said she and her team will spend the next 2 months summarizing the views it has received. The next step will be for the chief executive to submit a report to the National People's Congress Standing Committee. Once the NPC Standing Committee approves amendments to the procedures of the CE and Legislative Council elections, the government will launch a second round of public consultation. The government will submit a reform proposal to LegCo, which requires the approval of 2/3 of lawmakers. And after the chief executive gives the proposal the green light, the CE will submit it to the NPC Standing Committee so as to implement universal suffrage in the 2017 CE election. Rani Samtani, TVB News.
Overseas now, in another day of dramatic developments in Ukraine. More than 40 people are dead after fighting between pro and anti-Russian groups broke out in the Black Sea port of Odessa. And in the rebel-held city of Slavyansk, a group of military observers held captive for a week have been released. A new front in a conflict that continues to divide a nation. Street fighting in Odessa between pro and anti-government activists turned into a deadly inferno at this trade union building. Firebombs were reportedly tossed into the building after some protesters ran into it for safety. Police say most of the victims either choked on smoke or died after jumping out of windows. The clashes in the previously calm city were triggered by a new Ukrainian military offensive launched yesterday to recapture rebel-held regions in the east. It's been centered on the city of Slavyansk, where rebels brought down 2 military helicopters, killing 2 pilots. Today, pro-Russian separatists there freed a group of 7 European military observers and 5 Ukrainian assistants, who had been held for more than a week. There were no conditions for their release. As the offensive began, the United Nations Security Council met for its 13th emergency meeting on the crisis. But once again, instead of action, there were only accusations. Russian ambassador to the UN, Vitaly Churkin, called on Kiev and its Western enablers to not commit a fatal error and stop the offensive, which he described as criminal.
This is yet again a gross distortion of the facts. The Ukrainian government has the right and indeed the responsibility to uphold the rule of law and protect its citizens in its own territory.
U.S. President Barack Obama and German Chancellor Angela Merkel have threatened tougher new sanctions if Moscow doesn't act quickly to defuse the crisis.
If, in fact, we see the disruptions and the destabilization continuing so severely that it impedes elections on May 25th, we will not have a choice but to move forward with additional, more severe sanctions.
The energy and banking sectors are likely targets. Next week, the UN will send its political chief to Kiev and Moscow to urge restraint and an immediate return to dialogue. Meanwhile, the United States and Germany remain far apart over U.S. surveillance practices, despite an offer from the American leader to address the issue through a cyber dialogue. During a joint news conference in Washington, visiting German Chancellor Angela Merkel said the 2 countries are still trying to hammer out an agreement on privacy and U.S. data monitoring and intelligence gathering. The issue has been casting a shadow over their relationship for months. Barack Obama says the U.S. has proposed the same guidelines with Germany that it maintains with other allies. Revelations from whistleblower Edward Snowden, which showed that the National Security Agency allegedly targeted Merkel's mobile phone, caused an uproar in Germany.
Afghan officials say they've given up hope of finding any survivors from a landslide in the country's remote northeast region. The death toll stands at more than 2,100, with thousands of others displaced. The side of the mountain above Abarak collapsed yesterday as people were trying to recover belongings and livestock after a smaller landslip a few hours earlier. Hundreds of homes were destroyed in the landslides that were triggered by torrential rain. Officials worry another section of the mountainside could collapse. The Afghan military has flown rescue teams to the area. The impoverished area, which is dotted with villages of mud brick homes, has been hit by several landslides in recent years. U.S. President Barack Obama is raising questions about the death penalty following the botched execution of an Oklahoma inmate. As Alan Bugnier reports, Obama's asked the Attorney General's office to look into the significant problems surrounding the case.
Oklahoma attempted to carry out Clayton Lockett's death sentence by lethal injection, using a combination of drugs not previously used in the state. Lockett was already a 4-time felon when he was convicted in 2000 of murdering a 19-year-old woman who was buried alive. But the execution earlier this week went wrong, and Lockett was alive for almost 50 minutes after it began.
The The inmate, Mr. Lockett, began to exhale deeply, writhing on the gurney. His teeth were clenching. He was moaning at one time, making some audible noises. It sounded like he said man, lifting his head off the pillow multiple times.
In the application of the death penalty in this country, we have seen significant problems. Racial bias, an uneven application of the death penalty, situations in which there were individuals on death row who later on were discovered to have been innocent because of exculpatory evidence. And all these, I think, do raise significant questions about how the death penalty is being applied. And this situation in Oklahoma, I think, just highlights some of the significant problems there.
Obama maintained he's in favor of the death penalty in certain circumstances, such as mass murder and the murder of children. But he's asking the U.S. Attorney General to analyze problems surrounding its application. The United Nations also waded into the controversy.
The suffering of Clayton Lockett during his execution in Oklahoma on April 29th may amount to cruel, inhumane, and degrading treatment according to international human rights law.
Support for the death penalty in the U.S. is at its lowest point since 1972, but it's still relatively high, with 60% of Americans supporting capital punishment for convicted murderers. Alan Brooknia, TVB News.
Still ahead in tonight's news. Denials of conflict of interest over archaeological dig. The latest chapter in the Apple-Samsung court battle. And the Trailblazers finish off the Rockets in the playoffs.
When defeat is imminent.
Bishop to bishop 7. Queen takes knight pawn. Would you like me to recommend your next move?
One should accept it gracefully.
Prognosis increasingly negative. Let's not waste any more of one another's time. We both know how this ends.
Uncle, 18. Mask Expert presents Sherlock Holmes, A Game of Shadows. Sunday on Pearl's Movie of the Month.
Where am I going? I'm leaving to Japan. I'm participating in a summer course held by Nikkei, studying in an established Japanese institution with a long history and good academic reputation. If you want to learn Japanese the right way, come join Nikkei's overseas summer course in Japan.
一杯清茶，一陣涼風，優質生活就係咁簡單。Panasonic 最新嘅智能風扇，獨有 Nano-E 納米離子技術，能有助去除空氣中嘅異味粒子，令環境更清新。配合溫度感應功能，將室溫調至最適合你嘅溫度。採用直嚟電摩打，減少耗電，極致寧靜。Panasonic 智能風扇 ，Smart Home Smart Phone。
Panasonic.
I can't wake him up.
You're safe. You're in the hospital.
It's a dream. It doesn't mean anything.
Dreams get the better of the patient and Park.
I work with him. I can't want to sleep with him.
I know the difference between science and faith.
How can you believe in dark matters but not in dark spirits?
Monday, House at 10:40 on Pearl.
Welcome back. The chairman of the Antiquities Advisory Board says the MTR Corporation wrongly deemed the Sha Tin to Central Rail Link site to be of low archaeological value. But Andrew Lam denied any conflict of interest over the railway company's stance. It's said to be the most precious artefacts from the Song and Yuan dynasties found in Hong Kong in recent years. Although work has now stopped at the Sha Tin to Central Rail Link construction site in Kai Tak for more surveying, some conservationists noted damage had already been done. The head of the Antiquities Advisory Board, Andrew Lam, told TVB News today the initial environmental impact assessment conducted by the MTR Corporation included wrong judgment. But he denied there may be a conflict of interest issue at hand.
If that's a conflict of interest, and then what would we like to see? Would it not be
a problem that the government or the taxpayer has to pay for all those assessment works. That should be borne by project proponent. Are we saying that actually project proponent should pay for whatever the government demand them to do?
He added that heritage is just one of many aspects that needs to be examined in the environmental impact assessment.
When it comes to air impact, noise impact, are we going to ask for the same kind of set of requirements that the project proponent should not seek consultants or do their own work and hand it all over to government or an independent body? Now, I wouldn't say yes or no, but that's simply not the current system provide for.
Do you agree that there is a conflict of interest, however?
I don't see that, because for the government or any advisory or statutory body like ourselves, the key role is to monitor.
But Lam also admitted that the Antiquities Advisory Board has little power in its monitoring role, as it has no say in decision-making. A review on heritage conservation has been in the works for a while now, but as more pressing issues have emerged in society, plans for a public consultation exercise has been delayed. Lam said today the consultation should be launched within the next 2 months, and he hopes the public will be active in pitching ideas.
A LegCo panel today passed a motion calling for the setting up of a proposed Innovation and Technology Bureau as soon as possible. Rachel Lung reports.
Various groups and trade representatives today attended a special meeting of the Information Technology and Broadcasting panel to express their views towards the proposed bureau. Some voiced support for the plan.
If there is no bureau, no one will be held accountable. Therefore, we must have the bureau first. But time is not on our side, as I said. If we return the proposal and have another discussion for half a year, we would actually lag behind another generation of IT development.
But some accuse the government of failing to adequately outline the structure of the bureau.
To set up a bureau now, and the proposal really is lacking in substance. So I think the proposal is not practical, it's not feasible. I'll ask the Secretary to tell us why it does not also cover creative industries. For creative industries like films and animation, of course, they would rely on IT, but different industries like finance and logistics are also making use of IT. IT is only part of it. And for this part, we propose that when we set up a designated bureau, we would set up a designated bureau to take charge of IT and our creative industries. To put everything related to IT under the new ITB is not too practical. We therefore believe that the ITB should be a designated high-level.
Charles Mok, the legislator representing the IT sector, praised the government for taking a step forward in diversifying Hong Kong's economy. Mok also urged the public to put more trust in the government so that it can put forth initiatives that benefit the society more. Rachel Ling, TVB News.
Next, concerns about a series of deadly industrial accidents so far this year. Secretary for Labour and Welfare Matthew Cheung has promised to take action to prevent the situation from worsening.
In just the first few months of this year, industrial accidents have already claimed 10 lives. The fatal accidents mainly involved lifting operations and work high above ground. In his latest blog post, Secretary for Labour and Welfare Matthew Cheung called it a rare situation in recent years. Particularly with the construction industry set to continue growing over the next few years, the government is highly concerned about the safety of workers. There were 22 fatalities in the construction industry in 2013, 2 fewer than the year before. Cheung said the Labour Department has already begun special law enforcement action targeting workplaces that may not follow safety procedures. In the first season of the year, 138 temporary suspension notices were issued and 167 cases are to be prosecuted. Cheung also wants to see penalties for the violation of safety regulations raised. Labour groups want to raise awareness on the issue and have called for the government to do more to protect workers' rights.
California jury has awarded Apple $119 million in a patent battle with Samsung over alleged copying of smartphone features. The verdict was a far cry from the $2.2 billion Apple was seeking and is viewed as a small victory for the maker of the iPad and the iPhone. Analysts say it barely beats the cost that Apple spent on litigation. Apple and Samsung have been in litigation for the past 3 years. Some industry observers see the ongoing legal dispute as an attempt by Apple to curtail the rapid growth of phones based on Android software, Google's main rival. Samsung is the largest adopter of the Android operating platform. Celebrity publicist and PR guru Max Clifford has been sentenced to 8 years in prison in Britain for indecently assaulting teenage girls. He was found guilty of assaulting 4 girls in the 1970s and 1980s. The judge said even though the offenses happened a long time ago, they were of a very serious nature. During the trial, prosecutors described Clifford as a manipulator who used his celebrity connections to lure young girls, promising them prominent acting roles in exchange for sexual favors. The 71-year-old had denied all the charges.
The U.S. has reported its first case of Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS. The patient fell ill after returning to the U.S. from Saudi Arabia, where he was a healthcare worker. He's reported to be in good condition in an Indiana hospital.
We don't think this poses a broad threat to the general public. We are concerned and taking this seriously and focusing on close contacts of the patient so that they can be monitored for signs and symptoms. But we think the risk for the general public is very low.
Saudi Arabia is at the center of the Middle East outbreak of MERS that began 2 years ago. Overall, at least 400 people have had the respiratory illness. More than 100 people have died. All right, James, over to you for sports.
That's right, Diane. And one of the NBA teams is beginning to book their tee times. The first round of the NBA playoffs has been a wild ride, with 5 of the 8 series going the distance. In Portland, the Houston Rockets needed to win against the Trailblazers to force a Game 7. Here's Jamison Wong.
This one was close throughout. Portland's Damian Lillard from distance. He scored 25 and would figure big time late. Houston needed a win to force a Game 7. James Harden to Dwight Howard, 2 of his 26. Harden with a game-high 34. Taking out to the fourth quarter, Blazers down by 2. Under a minute to go, Nicholas Batum tied it at 96. Now the Rockets with time running out. Chandler Parsons ended up with the ball and the bucket. Houston back up by 2.
Trying to keep it. Parsons scores with 9. Unbelievable.
Only enough time for a catch and shoot, and Lillard with the deep 3. Portland wins 99-98. Rip City advances to the Western Conference semifinals for the first time in 14 years. Jamison Wong, TVB News.
Martin Flores and Angel Cabrera share the lead at the halfway point of the PGA Tour event in Charlotte. Flores also had the shot of the day on the 11th hole. The American fired a 4-under 68 on Friday and stands at 9 under par overall. Kevin Streelman also had a pretty nice shot from just off the green. He's 6 off the pace. American sprinter Tyson Gay has been given a 1-year ban for a failed drugs test. The 31-year-old has been ordered to return the silver medal he won in the 4x100-meter relay at the London Olympics. The suspension has been backdated so Gay can actually return to competition next month.
And that's the news for tonight. Thanks for watching.
Good night.